general questions about your work and your ideas. So let's start with, what is your profession? I mean, what do you do for a living?
I'm an architect. I'm not sure if I make a living, but that's what we do every day.
Okay. And where do you work?
In Dublin. I think I've been working in the same room, except for a break of about 5 years. I've been working in the same room since 1977.
Okay, so it's... Do you also...
So I'm what you call stable. Yeah.
Okay. But you also work in a virtual space, like, I don't know, a space that it's more like not necessarily a physical space, like this room that you have, I don't know, like when you are on travel or when you have to go and see for a project and you have to go somewhere else, then you have kind of
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, what's very nice about traveling is that you read and work and all of that. And I think when you're an architect, you work all the time, even when you're sleeping. Do you ever find that when you're working really hard, you go to sleep and you wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and you're thinking about space? I love that, being so engaged in the project that you're...
So you have like a sketch pad next to your bed so you can sketch your ideas?
No, not quite. Although once I dreamed about a fantastic building and I tried to sketch it afterwards, but it wasn't as good as the dream, you know. But
that's why it's a dream.
Yeah.
Okay, and how would you say you approach a project, like the first steps maybe that you take into consideration when you have a new...
It's probably... I think it's a combination of hunch and trial and error and instincts and just there's no actual pattern. I think it depends on the project. Like if the program is very complex, we talk a lot about the program. Like we do a lot of educational buildings, so we have a lot of discussions about what should a school be, should it be a tree house, should it be a meadow, should it be like a mountain, you know, what is a university, what should a university be like, you know, because I work in a group as a team, we work alone, but we also work together like you as students, where you talk about ideas and what would be relevant to look at in this project. I mean, sometimes something that you haven't managed to do in the past, you say, okay, well maybe we could use what we did 4 years ago. Maybe we could start with that and see if it's possible to continue. And when you said a virtual space, I thought what you meant was the space of the imagination, because that's what I think of as virtual space. Or maybe real space.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe this virtual space could also be connected to somehow the like the references that you have in your mind as well, somehow. The all those
Always.
images that you have that are sort of constantly present in doing a project.
Always. I think probably as we get older, the thing that we try to do is to call up references and say, could it be like this, or could it be like that? You know, I think you need to get some reference points to say, well, it's like a bridge, or it could be like a castle or a fortress, or you know, sometimes we use metaphors and stories to try to find what the nature of a project could be. And I think stories and metaphors and ideas and references for sure. I mean, that's why I think the theme of the lecture is so good, because have you ever heard Peter Merkley speak about architecture and going to architecture school. He speaks beautifully about that, where he talks about, when you go to school as a child, you learn how to write A, B, C, D.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to architecture school, that you're a child again, and you have to learn a language. And you can't speak until you know the language.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think it's so linear, because I think sometimes a first year architect can speak more clearly than a very old architect. So that's, I think, what's wonderful about practice and teaching, is that it's not a linear process, but you do have to learn how to express the things you're thinking about through architecture.
So let's say that reference somehow or means to explain somehow also architecture.
It means to connect with the practice of architecture. I think a reference is what it says. It's a reference point which connects you to something.
Do you have recurring references that you find more, like several times and for different projects maybe?
Yeah.
And do you think they could become an obsession, a sort of an obsession?
Yeah, but I think that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Cézanne and his Mont Saint-Victoire, that lasted him all his life. So I think it's what you do with it. It's what you do with a reference yeah. And sometimes you just throw it away and you just don't want to think about that again. You want to move somewhere else.
Okay, and could they also be related to the tradition in this sense? I mean, to the tradition that every person has, depending on where they studied architecture, or where they grew up, or where they learned. I mean, either they learned from a master, or if they learned from just working with their hands.
I was thinking about that. I think where you grew up, where you learning from a master is a starting point, but it's not an end point. And I think what's interesting about architecture is that it's a universal language, but it's also local. In the way that music is, or painting, it's local because it has come out of something particular, but it speaks universally. And that's one of the things that I think, it's a different thing to globalization. I think something which is universal has a different meaning to the way we speak about globalization, because globalization, I think, is about putting the same thing in 100 different places. Something being universal is something that comes out of something very local, but has a universal content. I suppose that's true of all arts, not just architecture.
Yeah, I think so. And do you think you belong to a tradition?
Absolutely. I don't think you can be an architect without belonging to a tradition, but I don't know if the tradition is the future, the present, or the past. I think tradition and time are interesting because obviously it is the past, because we don't know what the future is, but it's interesting to think about time and tradition, because time we measure to try to organize our lives, but you can't measure time. And it's not linear. And sometimes it's really short and sometimes it's really fast. And I think tradition is the same. It's kind of, it compresses and it's remote, or it comes very close, or, it's there in the ether that you connect with. There's a lovely way of singing in Ireland which is called Sean Nos, which means old time. And Sinead O'Connor, I don't know if you know the Irish singer Sinead O'Connor? No. Anyway, she's very famous, obviously known in Mendrisio, but she is very famous around the world. And she wrote out a record called, CD, called Sean Nos Nua, which means old, new song. And to be a Sean Nos singer in Ireland, you have to, like the teachers say, that you have to really become the channel of the song, that you have to know it and know it really well, so that the song comes through you. And I love that. I think as architects we're connecting into something that's much bigger than we are. We're trying to just be a little channel for some energy to make something.
Yeah, that could be the meaning of tradition in a way, that you have learned something, tradition and history as well, that you have to know it in order to do something that is yours. And that there comes the question, where does tradition ends and when does individualism begins somehow?
But I'm not sure. Khan talks very interestingly about this, about the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and that knowledge doesn't bring wisdom. And sometimes I think that's why young architects can make, who know very little, can make something amazing, because they're using what they know as well as their intuition or their own wisdom. And that's why teaching is wonderful, because you know that the only difference between you and the student is that you're a bit older and you have a bit more experience, but that doesn't make you a better architect. And I think that's what's very interesting about teaching and practice, and very often you find architects make their first building as their best building, which is, it's sad sometimes, but it's also amazing that can happen. So I think it is about knowledge, but it's also about channeling, how you open yourself to the phenomenon of architecture. That's what I like about the idea. And Eliot talks about it in that text. He talks about the poet being a medium. That you're a medium for the poetry. It's nice to think about it like that, because then it takes the pressure off a little bit. You just have to stand in the right place, or
Yeah, it's true.
Just connect up with this thing as a phenomenon.
And did you have a master, or did you have a master?
We were asked to. There was an exhibition in Dublin recently, and I was asked to choose my favourite book, and I chose a book that was so old and battered, which was the Tiny Handbook of Le Corbusier. And I've stuck it together about 10 times, because I've had it since 1969. And we were asked to write why we chose that book, and I was saying that I chose it because it looked like my favourite book, but it wasn't necessarily my favourite book. But it's probably the book that I learned most from for probably 10 years, and then I put it aside for maybe 10 years, and then came back to it again. So as a student, Le Corbusier was for sure my master.
Okay, and you mentioned the first built work of some architects. Do you remember your first work, and what does it mean to you, your first built work?
I think it meant terror, because I was 2 years out of college, and it was the conversion of a gatehouse for a friend of a family, and I didn't know anything, but it was a combination of excitement and terror. Fear. It takes about, I don't know, as an architect you go around a lot of the time with your stomach in a knot, because things leak and they crack and they don't work and all that stuff.
Could you could your first built work become a reference at some point?
Well, it's not there anymore, but
or maybe your own work.
No, I definitely got better as I got older, for sure. I'm not one of those who did my best work early. Absolutamente no.
Absolutamente no.
Yeah.
But you do use some of your previous work as a reference for future works.
Always, I think things roll, I think that's the other wonderful thing about being an architect, is that you make a lot of small projects which seem insignificant. But when you add them together, like when we won a big competition, we found that all the years of doing lots of small projects meant that we were ready to deal with something much bigger. You're all the time learning and developing a language of building, which is nothing to do with scale, but it usually starts small and builds up. So the way you make a window. I mean, how do you make a window? It's one of the most difficult things to do, to make a beautiful window. You know, you could spend years trying to make a fantastic window. And all that time one spends thinking about small things like a window or a door or the way a roof sits on a wall. You know, it builds up over time. I just realised that I'd been bitten by mosquitoes when I was looking at that house this morning.
In Catania?
In Catania, yeah.
You realised it now. It's fast. Okay, for the second half of the interview we have small questions, which if you wish you could answer as fast as you can.
Okay.
It's really intuition and more like of, let's say, the first thing that comes up in your head. So where would you like to live?
Dublin.
Okay. Do you have any book to suggest?
Book. The Magic Mansion, Thomas Mann.
What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Why?
I have no idea. Maybe it's the sky. I have no idea.
Okay. What's the first architect that comes in your mind?
Well, because we've been talking about Le Corbusier just now, that's the first architect that comes in my mind.
And the first let's say, the architect of the week.
Well, this lady I met this morning was fantastic, Maria Giuseppe Grasso. I just met her this morning, and she really gave me fantastic encouragement, because she's making beautiful work, really tiny, in the middle of nowhere, and I'd never heard of her. So it's wonderful, you know, because it's not all about business or being busy. I mean, she's busy, but I just found that work really inspiring.
What's your most frequent mistake?
I was going to say self-criticism, but I don't think that's a mistake. I think one needs it. I don't know, Michelle, I mustn't make any. I can't.
Doesn't matter. You can also decide not to answer.
Okay.
Do you listen to music when you design?
Yeah. Well, when I'm at home, it's not easy to listen to music in the office.
Okay.
I love Keith Jarrett. I listen to Keith Jarrett a lot when I'm working.
Okay. Do you have an obsession?
I don't think so.
No?
I like drink.
I know.
But I don't think I'm obsessed.
No. Me neither. Do you believe in architecture without architects?
Yes.
Would you say that an architecture project is political?
Yes.
How so?
Because architecture expresses values. It's not value free. In that sense, it's political.
Theory or practice?
Practice and then theory. Action and then thinking.
That's a good answer.
Well, you make something and then you try to work out what you've made. I really believe in making. The act of making, the act of drawing, the act of thinking. But again, it comes back to this thing of I don't think creative work is linear. I think, in a way, I prefer the term thought to theory. something I'm always slightly wary about in terms of theory. It's probably means different things in different languages.
Okay. Last question: is there something you have never been able to realize?
There's so much. Actually, in your initial questions, it said, "Is there something you've never been able to make?" And Yvonne said, "Money."
Money.
You've never been able to realize a full bank account.
Who knows?
No, I think it's actually something I was going to talk about this evening because I took that as one of the themes. There are many things, but I was just going to show one thing that we didn't manage to realise. Because it's always there on reserve, that you try again.
Good. Okay. That's all for the interview.
Yeah.
Thank you.